So it's July and the world is continuing to spin and the royals are continuing to be royal and continuing to be busy. And legal matters afoot this week, so plenty to chat about. So
yeah, I've arrived with a book.
Yeah, I
of
mean,
legal
I've got
cases.
the same sort of 32 legal pages. And actually, whilst we call this a royal podcast, we're talking about Harry and Meghan quite a lot this week. We've had many weeks, I should point out, because I do get complaints on social media that we talk about them too much, given they've left the royal family.
But I mean, they have left as working members of the family, but they are still very much members of the royal family.
Well, he is still the Queen's grandson. Yeah. He's still Prince Charles's son and Prince William's brother, even though they've left as working members of the royal family. But actually, a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about, as you will find out shortly, is when Harry and Meghan were very much in the royal family and all the things that were going on during her pregnancy with the Mail on Sunday, the letter that they published and the legal case. Plus, Prince Harry's been talking about racism this week in the light of Black Lives Matter and the protests around the world following the death of George Floyd. I mean, that's why we're talking about Harry and Meghan.
That's
I always feel like I have to justify
it
before we go down the routes.
No, anyway, as the Queen said, they're still very much part of the family, so I think we're very much allowed to talk about them.
Didn't you say beloved members of the family or something like that? Dear members.
I think I've got it written here. They will always be much loved members of my family.
Loved members of my family. So they will always be much loved members of the Queen's family. Hence why we are going to talk about them
on a royal podcast.
On a royal podcast.
Yes.
There we go. That was a very long justification of why Harry and Meghan will feature very heavily in this podcast.
Yes.
But other things will feature as well, won't they?
Other
in Robinson's Royal Rundown.
Will. So, yes, as you say, Meghan this week, the latest development in the court case between Meghan and the Mail on Sunday over the publication of a letter she wrote to her father, Thomas Markle. She has had to respond to some of their requests for additional information, and a lot has come out in these documents, 31 pages. Made a lot of the front pages here in the UK.
Yeah, I've got my 31, you've got your 31. That's 62 pages of A4 paper printed.
Yes,
we will recycle them.
Prince Charles won't be happy with us.
We'll recycle. I haven't even got it on both sides. I should change the settings in my printer.
Prince Harry made a very powerful speech at the Diana Award yesterday, focusing on racism.
Yep.
The Duchess of Cambridge.
Just to point out, we had Tessie Ojo, the CEO of the Diana Award, on this podcast. If you want to go back just a few episodes and find her, because she was talking about racism in that, wasn't she? Anyway, I interrupt. Carry on.
That's all right. The Duchess of Cambridge had a visit to a hospice in East Anglia, which we were able to share the images of at the weekend. And she also narrated a short film which was aired on the day that Wimbledon, the championships, should have started.
Yeah. You always like to go to Wimbledon.
I love Wimbledon. It's
you got
great.
some lucky tickets, didn't you?
I did, in the ballot. I always apply in the ballot with my mum. And
it's not this year.
No, we had tickets.
Oh, right.
But they've rolled over to next year.
Okay.
So
all right. Well,
I'll hold on to them.
I wouldn't put them in the bin or the recycling.
Definitely won't.
And we've been hearing from Princess Anne this week.
We've been hearing from Princess Anne. She read a Thomas the Tank Engine story for Save the Children's Save with Stories, which Meghan also did for Archie's first birthday.
And ITV announced this morning, because I got a message in my inbox, nothing to do with us at ITV News, but a production company has made a documentary on Princess Anne for her 70th birthday, and that will be airing in the summer, so we can talk about that. So let's kick off with some very new developments, actually, that happened this afternoon, and I'm often criticised on social media for not focusing on Prince Andrew, but I'll have to say that's very untrue. Every time there's a development, we talk about it, and there has been a development this afternoon in the US with the arrest of Ghislaine Maxwell, someone that Prince Andrew himself, as he said in that interview, the disastrous interview last year, that he was friends with and he has seen fairly recently.
Yeah, and she's a very close associate of Jeffrey Epstein.
So the allegations, the indictment in New York does not mention Prince Andrew at all. There's 18 pages of the indictment. Prince Andrew's name isn't in there, but you won't be surprised to learn that when there's a press conference about any developments to do with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and the very, very serious charges that they are accused of, Prince Andrew's name does come up, and it did in the press conference.
It did. In the press conference, there were two questions in relation to Prince Andrew. The first was, did they still want to talk to him, and would that be as a witness or as a suspect?
That's key, isn't it? Because Prince Andrew's always said that he would be prepared to give a statement as a witness, and his legal team said a few weeks ago that that 3 times this year he's offered to give them some form of statement. And they were keen to point out, in fact, I've got the statement from him here, that Prince Andrew is not a target of this FBI investigation, only that they want to speak to him as a witness.
Correct. The answer to the question was that they were not going to comment on anyone's status in this investigation, but they would welcome Prince Andrew coming in to talk with them, and they would like to have the benefit of his statement. So again, reiterating that. And the follow-up question to that was that his advisors, who you've just referenced there, Blackford's, have said that they need to offer an olive branch in order to get things going again, and would they be prepared to do that? And Audrey Strauss, the acting attorney, said there'd be no further comment other than that their doors remain open.
And their doors remain open. But, you know, as we understand, or the last conversation that I had with Prince Andrew's legal team, is that communication has yet to happen. But what I think is quite important is that even though, as I reiterate, Prince Andrew says he has done nothing wrong, he denies all the allegations against him, but there are 4 properties named in here, 4 of Epstein's properties, 1 in New York, 1 in Florida, 1 in Santa Fe in New Mexico, and also it mentions alleged crimes that were committed at Ghislaine Maxwell's property in London. Has to be said that Prince Andrew said in that interview he'd been to 3 of those 4 residences, hence why he is a person of interest with whom the FBI wished to speak as a witness.
Yeah, I mean, he has stayed at Epstein's properties. He said that in the disastrous Newsnight interview with Emily Maitlis. He was asked, had you been on his private plane? Yes. Had you stayed at his property on Palm Beach? Yes. Had you stayed at his property on the island? Yes. So we know that they were associates and that he had stayed with him, and that's why they still want to speak to him.
But we should be clear, today in these latest developments, there are no allegations relating to Prince Andrew in the indictment from the US prosecutors, but it is probably worth you listening to that exchange that happened in that press conference in New York on Thursday afternoon.
I'm not going to comment on anyone's status in this investigation, but I will say that we would welcome Prince Andrew coming in to talk with us. We would like to have the benefit of his statement.
So his advisors have said that you need to offer an olive branch in order to get things going again. Would you be prepared to do that?
You know, I have no further comment beyond what I just said, which is that our doors remain open, as we've previously said, and we would welcome him coming in and giving us an opportunity to hear his statement.
Shall we just talk about these 31 pages and then we can put them to one side and not have to refer to them anymore?
Yes.
So in front of me, I've got HR8, the Duchess of Sussex, and Associated Newspapers Limited, which is the publisher of the Mail on Sunday.
That's interesting that it's HRH, isn't it? Because they did say that.
Well, they are still HRHs, they just won't use them, but I presume for legal purposes that is still her official title. Anyhow, so this is the ongoing battle between Meghan and the Mail on Sunday. She is suing the newspaper for breach of privacy, for copyright infringement after they published the private letter that she sent to her father, Thomas Markle, shortly after the wedding. The reason we're talking about this now is because the newspaper sent a load of questions to Meghan's legal team. They have replied, and it's been made public for one reason or another. And there is a lot to talk about in here, isn't there? I mean, where do we start? Friend A, friend B, friend C, friend D, friend E. Actually, I didn't bring it in, but we do have the People magazine as well. That's part of the story. So why don't you explain?
So,
or do you want me to?
I'll explain. That's fine. This all centres, a lot of the case centres around an interview 5 of her friends did anonymously with People magazine defending Meghan. And in that, one of the friends, friend A, referred to this letter that had been written by Meghan and sent to her father. These 5 friends are only identified in these court papers as A, B, C, D, and E. And
the reason it's important is because the Mail said in its defence, the Mail says, well, how can you claim this letter is private? Your friends, Meghan's friends, already referred to its existence and some of its content in the People magazine previously. That's their defence. Meghan's obviously hit back quite hard at this, and actually paragraph after paragraph through here, doesn't it? It talks about she did not know her friends were going to do it. Her friends were concerned for her. She didn't know the publication was going to happen. She didn't authorise it. They basically decided on their own backs, is what Meghan says in here, to do this with People magazine, and they even got the summary of her letter to her father wrong in the way in which they characterised it.
And I think the most important part that has been picked up within these documents is this point where it says the claimant, Meghan, had become the subject of a large number of false and damaging articles by UK tabloid media, specifically by the defendant, Mail on Sunday, which caused tremendous emotional distress and damage to her mental health. As her friends had never seen her in this state before, they were rightly concerned for her welfare, specifically as she was pregnant, unprotected by the institution and prohibited from defending herself.
Now, of all the words in that sentence that you've just read, emotional distress, damage to her mental health, the thing that everyone's picked up on are these 4 words: unprotected by the institution. In other words, Buckingham Palace didn't give me any support when I was pregnant and all these stories in the tabloid newspapers were being written about me.
Yeah.
Which
That's essentially what she's claiming.
Which is pretty serious accusation to make, isn't it?
And that these friends were so worried about the state she was in,
yeah,
and the distress caused that they intervened.
I mean, and there's also there's criticism, also sort of implied criticism of Buckingham Palace's policy of not commenting when people put these claims to them, and she was sort of saying that in effect the not commenting, I'm just trying to find that section in my many pages here, but in effect Meghan's saying that the not commenting meant her friends felt silent, she wasn't able to defend herself, which was again I think a criticism of the sort of palace operation, never explain, never complain.
And the reason I wrote down those words about Meghan and Harry, the Queen, saying they were much loved members of the family. If you remember those statements that the Queen put out in January, when the negotiations were going on about how they would move forward, the Queen said in 2 statements, one, that they would remain much loved members of the family, how they were valued parts of the family, how she was particularly proud of how Meghan has so quickly become one of the family. So I think for them to have seen this and how, you know, she felt unprotected by the institution, that's going to be quite hurtful to them.
Yeah, I think so. And also, again, I think I said this, and we'll go on to talk about Harry's comments on racism. I think now that they are outside the royal family, they have not only the distance in status that they're no longer members of the royal family, but also the distance in proximity. They live in California, which is many miles away from London. They kind of now feel like they can say this stuff, I think, and perhaps they wouldn't have done previously. You know, and I mean, the other thing in here is just all the detail about her father, you know, because the Mail is alleging that she didn't look out for her father, and she was talking about the time she tried to call him. There's even like times of day when she was trying to call him. They've gone through the sort of phone records. I mean, this is not us snooping around, I should point out. This is all legal documents that have you know, arrived. The fact that she sent a car to pick up Thomas Markle. The car arrived on the morning of Sunday the 13th. The car arrived to pick him up in Mexico. An apartment suite had been booked in the town of Brentwood in Los Angeles County. He was meant to stay there for 3 nights. The flight should have been on Wednesday the 16th of May, just before the wedding. She'd booked a tailor to measure him up in Los Angeles, and she was going to get someone in Canada and London to make his suits. I mean, heavens above. I mean, this is a lot of information in here.
A lot of information, and while we don't know who the 5 friends are, we can be sure that they're pretty close friends, because we know it says in here that she only discussed this letter with Harry, her mother Doria, friends A and C, the Kensington Palace communications team, and her solicitor.
Yes.
And she said that friend A witnessed the claimant's many calls to her father during the week of the wedding from Nottingham Cottage, which is where Harry and Meghan were living at Kensington Palace, as well as from wedding rehearsals and pre-wedding events in Windsor and from Windsor Castle, all of which were ignored or declined. Suggests that the friend A was very much part of the wedding preparation.
And they also say that friend B had a relationship with the editor of the People magazine, and that's, she thinks, how they decided to speak to that magazine about Meghan. But
it says that Meghan didn't know that the friends had done it. She was distressed when she found out that it was being published, but that she had no knowledge that they'd gone ahead and done that. They'd done that off their own back.
Yeah, and I think it just, I mean, it was a very, very unhappy week. And actually, if you step away from all the detail that's in here, and again, it was made explicit in here and has been in previous court papers as well, that Thomas Markle has not met his son-in-law, Prince Harry, and nor has he met his grandson, Archie. And the last time Meghan spoke to her father was before the wedding in 2018. Rather explains the very sorry personal state of affairs that this...
It's very sad. And then to be playing this family matter, whether it's her relationship with her father or their relationship with the family, and what they feel about the institution, is all playing out very publicly, and it shows probably just how determined she is to carry on with this case. The fact she's prepared to put all this in the public
and it will be kind of more public if it does end up in court, and you've got one Thomas Markle giving evidence,
5 friends,
one
A to
Meghan
E,
Markle,
and one
friends
Meghan Markle.
A, B, C, D, and E, and we won't even speculate. I mean, there's a lot of speculation about who these friends might be, but I don't think it's our place to necessarily do that here. So, I mean, we could talk about this for a long time. I could read you every page if you want, but they are publicly available court documents, and if you do wish to read them, I'm sure you'll be able to find them. Shall we pause at that point and let's have a listen to Harry? Let's have a listen to Harry speaking from California. Who knows who was behind the camera? Perhaps it was Meghan. We couldn't
in the
hear.
same spot,
In
actually.
the same spot that Meghan did her speech a little while ago. Let's have a listen to what he said and how he addressed the issue of race and racism, and then let's chat about what he said after.
Hi everyone, I hope you're all safe and well wherever you are in the world, and that you're looking out for each other, which I have no doubt that you are. I am so incredibly proud to be part of these awards as they honour the legacy of my mother and bring out the very best in people like you. You are all doing such incredible work, and at a time of great uncertainty, you have found the power and inspiration inside of you to make a positive mark on the world. And I love that the Diana Award is able to help you do it. I know that my mother has been an inspiration to many of you, and I can assure you, she would have been fighting your corner. Like many of you, she never took the easy route, or the popular one, or the comfortable one. But she stood for something, and she stood up for people who needed it. Right now, we are seeing situations around the world where division, isolation, and anger are dominating, as pain and trauma come to the surface. But I see the greatest hope in people like you, and am confident about the world's future and its ability to heal because it is in your hands. My wife said recently that our generation and the ones before us haven't done enough to right the wrongs of the past. I too am sorry. Sorry that we haven't got the world to the place that you deserve it to be. Institutional racism has no place in our societies, yet it is still endemic. Unconscious bias must be acknowledged without blame to create a better world for all of you. I want you to know that we are committed to being part of the solution and to being part of the change that you are all leading. Now is the time, and we know that you can do it. People like Nazra, James, Dimitri and Jamar, Shania and Marvel, you are 6 young people that my brother and I are proud to specifically recognise tonight. And it is your voice that is far more important than mine.
So Harry was speaking, it was his contribution to the Diana Award, and interestingly enough, it was on the day, 1st of July. It's not only Canada Day, if you're watching this in Canada, happy Canada Day. 1st of July is also, was the birthday of Princess Diana. She would have been 59 years old, if you can imagine that, given, she died in her, what was she, 37, mid to late 30s, wasn't she? So Harry was speaking to the Diana Award, the charity set up for young people in his mother's name. He gave this speech to them, and as you just heard, he spoke about institutional racism still being endemic, and that he and Meghan had committed themselves to being part of the change.
Yeah, then this follows on from that very powerful speech that Meghan gave to the students graduating from her former high school in Los Angeles, Immaculate Heart, and Harry references that, as you heard, saying
from the same wall.
The same wall.
We think it was outside because we can hear some wind noise on the microphone. How would you describe the colour of that wall? Pink, buff, beige?
Pink. Definitely not
No?
pink. No.
Sort of
sand.
sand.
Sandy, not pink.
Not pink.
I don't think
All right,
pink.
fine.
No.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. I think it's a bit too much red in it to be sand. But anyway, both he and Meghan from that same location have contributed to the debate around Black Lives Matter and raised some very, very serious points.
They have, and I think we've talked about them being freer to speak about issues that they care deeply about. Now they're not working members of the family, and perhaps both of them have felt that they can address this issue because they've got that freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it does raise the question about whether or not, and I think we're probably right to raise this question, whether or not Harry was speaking from personal experience from the time that, when you think about it, it was 2 years, wasn't it, between Harry and Meghan moving to the UK, getting married, and then effectively leaving towards the end of 2020. Whether they've concluded that within those 2 years they witnessed and suffered from institutional racism. And interestingly, it was a point we put to one of the Diana Award recipients. It was a guy called James Frater, who was honoured for the work that he'd done to try and get more people from ethnic minorities, more BAME people into university. And this is what he said when I asked him whether he thought Harry has a point and whether he thought Meghan had suffered from any form of racism when she was in the UK.
It's a fact. I think a lot of people have been saying it for a very long time. And to have someone like Prince Harry come out and say it, I think is very powerful.
When Meghan was living here, in your view, was she subject to a level of racism, be that high or low?
I think it's very difficult to deny that the colour of Meghan's skin had an impact on the way people saw her and the way that people treated her.
So without doubt, Harry's most significant intervention on this, I mean, he's kind of touched on it before. And if you go back to the very, very beginning, when Harry's relationship with Meghan was first revealed, his press secretary did then criticise some of the commentary for having racial undertones. But by far and away, this was the most significant intervention that he's made.
Yeah, there was that. And he touched on it slightly in a Vogue, when the Duchess of Sussex guest-edited Vogue. He did an interview with Jane Goodall. And in that, he touched on unconscious bias, which is the words he uses again here.
Yes,
but again,
that it should be sort of acknowledged or recognised.
Yeah, but this is definitely the most significant comment he's made.
Didn't that Vogue article win some award this week? Didn't it? I saw some commentary. So the one that Meghan guest edited. So we spoke also to Tessie Ojo about it. Now Tessie was on our podcast, wasn't she, a couple of weeks ago? And we spoke about Meghan and race. And I mean, if I was to summarise what she said, it would be like, if time after time she was coming up against this, you do reach a point where you just think, I've had enough, which is what she told us then. So we asked her about whether she was surprised that Harry was quite so forthright in the video that he gave to the Diana Award. And the simple answer was no.
No.
Very similar to Princess Diana. They go where it might be uncomfortable for everyone else. They go where they're most needed. And so it did not surprise us at all that he did exactly what he said his mom did so many years ago.
And I think a lot of people might agree with that assessment, that Princess Diana was someone who wasn't afraid to tackle certain issues where people felt like they didn't have the support or the necessary backing.
Yeah, using her voice to highlight issues. And I think we can see with Harry and Meghan that they'll be able to use their platform to do exactly the same thing.
Yes, yeah, and actually I think where they, as they go forward and they've had to park their charitable trust, Archie Well and all the rest of it, I think they will now be focusing on the impact of coronavirus, but also on trying to engage more in the Black Lives Matter campaign. Right, I'm going to draw a line here, and that's the Harry and Meghan line, that we're not going to talk about them anymore in this podcast. We will now talk about other members of the royal family. So there's the bit of the podcast before the line and the bit after. And the bit after will focus on Kate and Anne, basically, the Duchess of Cambridge and Princess Royal.
Royal.
Yes.
Should we start with the Duchess of Cambridge?
Let's do that.
So
Want to do Wimbledon, a hospice? Let's do
Let's
the
do the
hospices,
hospice.
because actually we spoke to you last week about children's hospices.
we did. So it was Children's Hospice Week in the UK last week, and to finish the week, Kate went to visit a hospice, the Nook, one of the East Anglia children's hospices in Norfolk, and she went there to meet some of the staff and children. But she also, while she was there, do you remember she promised the Delph family that she was going to plant a sunflower in memory of their little boy Fraser, who they
died,
lost
yeah.
in January, and she did that. She repotted a sunflower while she was at the Nook.
I mean, it was such a sort of moving week, wasn't it? Children's Hospice Week. I mean, it's a very difficult subject to talk about. And there was the video last week, wasn't there, where Camilla and Kate sort of got together to support their various hospices. Kate does one in East Anglia, which is near to where William and Kate have a home in Norfolk. And, you know, I just think that they feel very passionately about the support that these hospices need. And actually, a lot of them are suffering from a lacking funding, like a lot of charities are suffering from as a result of the pandemic.
Well, Fraser's brother Stewie, do you remember he was the one running 5K every day in May to raise money for the hospice that his brother had been at? Which is
he was inspired, he said, by Captain
Yeah.
Tom, and the way Camilla said, Captain Tom's obviously got a, you know.
But actually,
lot to be
Camilla
thankful
spoke
for.
about the warmth and the laughter at these hospices that you could. She kind of felt worried when she first went to visit one, and actually you could see in the footage with Kate and the families and the children that warmth and laughter between them. It was really lovely to see.
Yeah, really was, and we wish all those hospices the very best, and it particularly is, I think Camilla described them, they're places of warmth and happiness, which is what a lot of people don't expect to find when they go into a children's hospice.
We also learnt that the mini Cambridges are quite competitive.
And how did we learn that?
You're looking at me blankly.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So they are.
This is one of your facts.
This is one of my facts that I'm going to
Yeah.
chuck in. They're having a sunflower growing competition, and
Right.
George is a bit grumpy because Louis is winning.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So his sunflowers going
His sunflowers.
up much more quickly.
Yeah. So Kate
Right.
said George is a little bit grumpy about that.
Maybe Louis is giving it some special feed or some coffee grounds or something.
Yeah.
Who knows? But they won't be going with their mum to Wimbledon this year because their
They
mum
will
won't be going
not.
to Wimbledon.
No one's
What
going
is
to Wimbledon.
Kate's position with the All England Tennis Club? She's the
She is patron of the
Patron.
All England Lawn Tennis and Croquet Club, to give it
That
its
one.
full official.
which is the organisation
Title.
which runs the competition better known as Wimbledon, which isn't
You
happening.
asked, so I've given it to you in its
I'm not surprised that you
entirety.
have it there. I'm very pleased that you wasted ink writing that out in your notebook.
Well, just in case you asked, which you did.
Which
so.
I did. And no Wimbledon this year, but have a look at this video that Kate made for the aforementioned
All England Lawn Tennis and Croquet Club.
350 days, 14 hours and 12 minutes between the last ball hit and when the next was meant to be. Over the years, your support has shaped this historic event. No matter the time of day, nor the names on the scoreboard, you have always been there, come rain or shine. This year, sadly though, things are very different. But we will bide our time until we sit on the edge of our seats again and celebrate again.
Oh, that is remarkable.
So when the time is right and we open the gates,
The waiting is over.
we will be back again. And it will have been worth the wait.
So no balls being, I was going to say bowled, but that's cricket, but no balls being hit this year.
No, we haven't got time to explain how you play tennis.
No,
But yes,
exactly.
we know that Kate is a huge fan. We
Loves a
see it
racket.
every year. Do you remember the pictures of her with Meghan
Yeah, I do, yes.
last year?
I'm sure
Yeah,
that would happen again.
She goes every year. She's a huge fan, and she does say in the video we will be back again, and it will have been worth the wait.
Yes.
So
Actually, Meghan was pictured there this time last year, wasn't she, with a couple of her friends, Lindsay, Roth, and somebody else.
Genevieve.
Last year? Just
It
before
was
the
just before
birth?
Archie's christening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After the birth, but before the christening. But no Wimbledon this year. There's no very much this year, as we all now know. But I think a lot of people look at Wimbledon as being quintessentially British summertime activity with the strawberries and the pims. And you can eat the strawberries, you can drink the pims, you just can't watch the tennis.
No, I mean they are playing some old matches back, but it's not quite the same.
But the hashtag Wimbledon Revisited, I think, was what Kate's video went up on. Anyhow, if you are, however, missing the tennis and you feel like passing some time, what you can do is listen to Princess Anne reading you a story of Thomas the Tank Engine.
You can. She's done this for Save the Children, Save with Stories, which is raising money to help children affected by COVID. And it was what...
No, someone else did that recently.
Someone else did that.
Yes.
The Duchess of Sussex did that.
Oh, no, we're going
for,
to mention this.
Archie.
Above the line.
I thought you were being bold, drawing a line, saying that's going to be the end.
So we're going to scratch that bit out of the podcast.
So yeah, no, the Duchess of Sussex did read to Archie for his first birthday, and that lovely video of what was she reading?
Duck and dog, duck and rabbit,
duck rabbit.
Yes.
Yes. Which one do you see? The duck or the rabbit?
Yes, yeah, that one. Anyway, back onto matters below the line. Princess Anne. She was reading Thomas the Tank Engine. Actually, a new one they've written. Is it a quite appropriate one? Thomas the Tank Engine goes to London to meet the Queen.
Yes.
And I love the way. I mean, have a look at the beginning of this video, and I love the way that she sort of gets a bit sort of stuck in her chair at one point, and then says, "I hope you're also sitting comfortably." Kind of, you would have thought she might have just
with a raised eyebrow
and started again, but she obviously only does things once, does Princess Anne, and this was the one take she made, we presume, of Thomas the Tank Engine.
This is a story about Thomas and the day he had to take the Fat Controller on a very special journey. Hope you're sitting comfortably. It was a sunny morning on Sodor. Thomas the Tank Engine was getting ready for a very important job. He was taking the Fat Controller to London to meet the Queen. Thomas's cab had been swept clean, his firebox was full of coal, and he had been scrubbed until he was the shiniest engine on Sodor. Beep beep! Thomas whooshed proudly down the track to pick up the Fat Controller. Next stop, London.
So you don't have Wimbledon to watch, but you do have the Queen's only daughter reading from Thomas the Tank.
You can imagine her reading that to grandchildren, can't you? Which you can name all of.
Isla.
Yeah.
Mia. Maya.
Yeah.
The Phillips children.
You've already named one. Yes.
Savannah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now Isla and Mia and Savannah, and that's three.
Yeah.
Can't do the other one.
One more to go.
Okay, you do it.
Lena.
Lena.
Okay.
Okay.
L-E-N-A.
There we are. Very good.
It's lucky there's two of us in this bureau.
Yes, exactly. You might as well just do the podcast by yourself.
No, that would be no fun. That would be no fun.
You can read out the name of the lawn.
I've decided to flip the quiz onto you.
Okay, so a two-part podcast. One part Harry and Meghan, second part other members of the royal family.
Who have been... Prince Charles has done a couple of engagements this week as well.
Yeah, that's
true. He's been out in
actually.
Gloucestershire, and he did one today in London with the mayor meeting Transport for London staff that have operated during the
great
lockdown.
picture, wasn't the great picture of Prince Charles with his hands in a grain store
at Shipton Mill, where they make flour.
Who've seen their flour sales increase by sort of like 16 billion%.
25-fold, I think.
Oh, 25-fold. Okay.
Because everyone's been in the kitchens baking because they've had nothing else to do.
Yeah. So now you know where your flour comes from, and he's there. And he's also been supporting London transport workers, as you say, who, on a very serious point, have had a very difficult time, and there have been a number of bus drivers who have tragically lost their lives from COVID-19 as well. So it's been when we say they're getting back to normal, they kind of are. Visits are happening, probably quite not at the pace that they were before.
Not at the pace, but they are beginning to attempt to do things. But they are being very cautious to ensure that they don't draw any crowds or too many people, because obviously then it's difficult to keep social distancing. So.
And instead of going to watch the Royals in person and be one of those crowds, you can just simply watch the podcast instead. So we're here every week, pretty much every Friday, hashtag Royal Rota ITV on social media. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at ChrisShipITV. You are
at Lizzie ITV.
And our Instagram page with all the pictures, literally all the pictures that you need from the week and the videos when they happen is at ITV News Royals on Instagram. So have a look at those. Thank you for continuing to watch, and we'll see you next week.